So just to change things up a little bit, we had an outside view this morning. Today we're going to, now the next session is a little more of an inside view. But a view that's going to be great for all of us from JR is going to interview Shelly Lazarus. Needs no introduction. Shelly's been our leader since I've been here at Ogilvy, and an important person to all of us and an important person to me. She's helped me through many things in my career, many times of uncertainty about what to do, how do I do it. So a great leader and a great leader of life lessons. So with no further introduction, Shelly Lazarus and JR. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Great. Well, for me, this is an honor to have the opportunity to speak to you and have you engage us. So this hopefully will be a treat for everyone here.
It's an honor for me.
Thank you, Shelly.
I just told JR I just spent 2 days at the Pentagon. I was just put on the business board of the Defense Department, and it was like a true out-of-body experience. So, and it's impossible. It's impossible to run. It's impossible to get anything done. So I'm so happy to be back here with you, just where we know how to do things, right?
So Shelly, I had the opportunity to look at some work online just to sort of prep myself for this. And I know that people have always asked you these questions before in some cases, but I want to definitely make sure that you're able to share your perspective with our employees here. Why did you originally choose to work at Ogilvy?
Oh God, that's actually a complicated story. It's I was an intern at General Foods between years at Columbia Business School. And I was the first woman professional who had ever been hired in the Maxwell House division of General Foods. It was a major moment, and Ogilvy was the agency. So that was my first exposure, and they were the most glamorous people I had ever met. I mean, I was thinking about it this morning. The account executive actually had a house on the water in Greenwich, the account executive, just, and it was like, oh my God, this place must be, how could, look where he's living. So anyway, I got to know this fabulous group of people at Ogilvy. Again, in retrospect, I was thinking, why did I think they were so creative and brilliant? And I think it came down to foam core boards, because where the rest of us would just talk to each other, when Ogilvy came to present an idea, they would hold up foam core boards with big visuals, and you go, God, that's brilliant. So it could be a trick. We could go back to foam core. We might be even further ahead. I finished business school, and I decided that I wanted to work on the client side. I didn't want to commute to White Plains. General Foods is now Kraft. So I took a job as an assistant product manager at Clairol, and I was wildly happy, and got a phone call one day from a headhunter who said, Ogilvy is looking for somebody who knows something about hair care. Because, and for all of you who've ever worked on Unilever, I came because Ogilvy had the assignment for Twice as Nice shampoo. It was the first shampoo and conditioner in one. The problem was that the way they demonstrated the conditioner, there was literally an oil slick that sat on the top of the shampoo. This was okay as long as there was no competition, but Unilever had now had this product in test market for 4 years. During which time the competitors had come along. They had figured out how to homogenize the oil, and so where Unilever had a market share of 8, it was now down to 3.5, and the conclusion by Unilever was, if Ogilvy only had someone who knew something about hair care, they wouldn't be in this situation. Wow. So nothing has changed. It was just, and so they were reaching out to find, Ogilvy was reaching out to find somebody who knew something about hair care to work on Unilever Twice as Nice. And so I got the phone call. I had no intention of leaving Clairol. I was wildly happy there. But I thought, God, I haven't seen all those Ogilvy guys in 2 or 3 years. I'll just go back to say hi. So I came back to have a few interviews here, and I got seduced by my old friends. I went to see all of them. And they said, oh, come, this will be so much fun. And I thought, yeah, I'll do 2 years at client side, 2 years at the agency side, and then I'll figure out what I'm doing. And I never left. And that is the whole story.
And it's so interesting now in this day and age where people are accustomed to coming to organizations and leaving within 6 to 8 months. So why did you stay?
I loved it. It was just, it never felt like work to me. I mean, they were the most, I was working with this fabulous group of people. They were funny and smart and unexpected, and and supported each other, and were challenging. And the work we were doing was amazing. I mean, to be able to use words and pictures and music to change people's minds about things, to inform them about things. I just was totally absorbed in what I was doing. And I always said that I always had so many challenges. I was always given more work, or I volunteered for more work, or that I actually never had time to think about leaving. So I never wanted to, and I never had time to, and I never got bored. But part of it was my own doing. I mean, you know, like I always liked working on more than one thing. It was like kind of, I have a very low boredom threshold. So I would always volunteer to do other assignments, and so I always had a portfolio of things that I was working on, and when one thing seemed too hard, I would just kind of, or I was losing interest, I would just kind of change off to another thing, and then, you know, I kept changing clients that I was working on. I would keep some, but then I would add a new one, and so it was really, I never stopped learning. I don't stop learning now. You know, so I've been here for over 40 years, and every day is different.
You had the opportunity to spend time with David Ogilvy.
I did.
What did you learn from David?
Oh, God. First of all, it was completely outrageous. I mean, you know, you say, talk about unexpected. You never knew what was going to happen, including going to dinner one night with a client. And David, literally, he ordered mayonnaise. That's what he ordered for dinner. And have you ever been in an awkward client situation? You know, the guy's looking at me like, is he kidding, or is he really going to eat mayonnaise? Just, and he did. He ate a bowl of mayonnaise. So at Le Cirque, just yeah, it was cool. So you know, you never knew what to expect. But David was, he had a maniacal consistency to what he believed, and it was all about people. It was always about people, and I think, you know, maybe because he started all alone, you know, it was just him, and so each person that he chose to join the agency was critically important to him, and so he paid great attention to whether that person was being challenged, developed, whether that person was learning, whether that person, you know, David used to say it's a simple formula to run an agency. You find the best people, you bring them in, you create an environment where they can be as successful as they can possibly be, and then you recognize and reward them. And all good things flow from that. You know, we have this saying that the people with the best people win. Well, that was David's entire philosophy. And so everything that he did was about developing people. And, you know, he used to talk about Ogilvy as a teaching hospital, you know, where you would have the best doctors and you would bring the best students in, and then the more experienced practitioners would train the junior people. And part of what you were learning was the commitment that you then had as someone who developed in the organization to the people who you hired and came along with you. And I think this commitment to training and development is part of what Ogilvy has always been about. You know, when David was around, and when I joined, he had already really retired, but he used to come back for, you know, weeks at a time. And he would actually have a session once a month for every new employee, for everybody who had joined in the prior month, would be invited. I'll tell you a story after, to David's session, and for 2 hours, he would just take you through everything he had learned about advertising and everything that he believed. So you could not go longer than 1 month without sharing the insight and knowledge that David Ogilvy had. And I've never forgotten this. So I'm called to this little meeting, and big meeting, I guess, and I go, and I'd say there were 10 people there. But it turns out that the guy sitting next to me, who had also joined, had been called to a client meeting that afternoon, and so couldn't attend. And this guy comes in, he sort of has no color, he's so pale, and he comes into my office and he says, okay, they're gonna fire me now. And I said, why? You just got here. And he said, well, because David Ogilvy just called me and said, he didn't even say who he was, he just said on the phone, what did you have to do this afternoon that was more important than hearing everything I know about advertising? And so, but that's how seriously he took it, so that if you didn't attend, David Ogilvy called you personally to find out what it was that was keeping you from ingesting a body of knowledge and experience that he had. And I think that is part of the ethic and the culture of this agency. And it's an obligation, I think, that everybody in the agency has to feel to pass on sort of the knowledge, the insight, the experience that everyone who came before us has gotten.
And those are one of the elements of strengthening our culture and keeping it going forward.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You always, there are stories about personal connections you had with him. I understand that there's a time when you were pregnant.
Well, that's how I met David. It's sort of, that's how I met him personally, because, you know, I was just in the audience for the intro. But I was 9 months pregnant, sitting in my office, and I looked up at 6 o'clock one night. I was an account executive. There's David Ogilvy standing in my doorway. And I'm going, I had a really little office. There's David. And when I looked up, I have no idea how long he had been standing there. It could have been for 10 minutes. I mean, because he could stare for a long time. That was another thing. He could just stare at you. So I looked up, and he said, are you all right? And I think he had come just because he'd never seen a woman 9 months pregnant working in his agency before. And then he said, may I come in? And so he did. We chatted for about 45 minutes, and every night at 6 o'clock for my entire 9th month of pregnancy, David came to visit me. And just to see how I was, just to talk. And so here's the thing, I always say Ogilvy is a meritocracy. It is. It's truly a meritocracy. And one of the reasons is that David made a point of not knowing anything about a person beyond their contribution to the organization, or beyond who they were as a person. So he didn't care about where you went to school. He didn't care about where you grew up. He didn't care, sort of what political party you belonged to. He didn't care what gender you were. He didn't know. I mean, he knew what gender you were, but the fact that he would be sitting with an account executive for 45 minutes every day for a month just tells you that he didn't care that I was an account executive. I'm sure he had no idea, because he didn't know people's levels or anything like that. And you can go through Ogilvy now. The woman who's now the CMO at Allstate, Lisa Cochran, she was another person who David just loved. And she might have been like an assistant, actually, when David met her. But every time he was in town, he'd go talk to Lisa. And he just had this coterie of people who he believed in and liked. And so I really do believe that when we say we have a meritocracy, it's authentic. It's authentic to the culture. And I always think it's because David dropped out of Oxford after a semester. And so where you went to school was of no interest to him, or whether you went to school. And I think and he went from there, to work in the kitchen of the Ritz Hotel in Paris. And he sold stoves door to door. And so he himself had such an eclectic background that I don't think it ever mattered.
Shelly, you've been part of many boards. You've led this organization. What do you think are some of the finer qualities of leadership
Well, I think, it's, there's a certain ineffable, thing that defines a leader. I think that leaders are inherently optimistic. I didn't know that when I started out, but it is a characteristic. If you don't believe there's going to be a better tomorrow, why would anybody follow you? It's like sort of, he doesn't even believe it. Why would I go over there with him? But I do think there's an inherent optimism. This is not kind of like childlike, Pollyanna. But you got to believe that there's a way and a path, and you've got to be able to communicate it to people. I think leaders are inherently generous. I think they share the problem. They ask people to participate. They build a team of people who can get something done. And then they share the applause, too. It's just sort of, there's an inherent generosity. I think leaders are good communicators. I mean, because if you want people to follow you, you better be clear in what the objectives are, what the goals are of what you're trying to do, and then continue to communicate how you're doing and where you are in the process, and be able to tap people on the shoulder once in a while and say, thank you. Again, generosity, thank you, and you're doing a great job. And these sound like, everything I know I learned in kindergarten. This sounds like that, but I can't tell you the number of people who don't do any of those things, which is shocking. You stand in a room and you watch someone who's trying to lead a group of people, and they're not paying any attention really to the people in the room. It's all I. It's, I'm so smart, but I'll let you come along because you're nice people. Yeah. And then totally ignore the people who brought them to where they are, at a certain point. So I think you have to pay attention to it. I mean, I think some people are, quote, natural leaders, but even if you are, there's so much you can learn about, really, so it's about motivating people and bringing them along. It's as simple as that.
You talk about focusing on the people and saying the simple things as thank you. I think sometimes we lose that in terms of just the way we focus as leaders. We have a lot of new and developing leaders here in the audience. What should they think about as they're growing their leadership skills, in addition to some of the thoughts you've had?
Well, I think you have to be thoughtful about it. I mean, you can't just take it for granted. You can't just think, if I do the right thing, other people are going to come along with me. I think you have to be conscious all the time of the people who are joining you on the adventure that you're on the journey, and whether they're learning, whether they're stimulated, whether they feel fulfilled by what they're doing. Because if you can't attract and keep people with you, it doesn't matter what level you're at. Everybody needs people to support them, to work with them. And you have to spend some time thinking about others. Again, everything I learned in kindergarten. Sharing is really important, right? Just you can't just take all this stuff for you. It's but again, I think you gotta give it a little time. I do remember when I first started to supervise people, and I remember this has stayed with me. I remember one very specific moment where a guy who worked for me had given me a presentation to look at over the weekend that he was going to make on Monday. And I read it, and it was a B. I could have gotten it to an A, easy, but I would have had to strip apart the whole thing and rewrite it, and I actually thought about it. I actually thought about it, and I thought about the trade-off between the demotivation that he would feel, because it was first thing Monday morning, so I was going to have to rewrite it, basically, versus he was a great person, a great colleague, and I just thought B's good enough. I did a few little things, and I said, Creighton, this is terrific, just present it on Monday. And he was, you know, he felt great, he did a great job. But I have never forgotten that moment. Because some of these decisions are discrete, that you have to think about not just the content, but the impact on the person. You know, what is the person I'm working with going to feel if I do this? I had another moment because we work in teams and we have clients, and so we have a lot of constituencies. I had a difficult client, actually, who we were in a meeting, we were reviewing concepts. 4 different creative teams had done these concepts, and they had presented them, spread them out around the room. And his way of sorting, of editing, was to go around the room, taking the ones he wasn't interested in, picking it up and dropping it on the floor. And I actually went after him, and I picked them up, and I put them back. And after a while, he watched what I was doing, and he looked at me like, why are you doing that? And I said, you know, Tony, you're not that interested in these, but there are people who worked all night and all weekend doing them. And I just think you might like them, but they're excellent ideas, and I don't like seeing them on the floor. And so, well, so, you know, sometimes you have to be tough. Sometimes you gotta stand up and say, this isn't right, not because of you, but because of the people with whom you work, and an inherent respect for the people with whom you work and for what they do is really what puts you in good stead for the next journey you need to go on.
We have a culture that continuously evolves. What have you seen over your time here with this culture? Where is it now?
Well, I think, you know, this is like brands. There's a universal core. There's something that's true to a brand no matter what century you're in or decade, or, you know, if you husband them well, if you take care of your brands. So I think our culture continues to be those things that David started out with, you know, focus on people, inherent respect, gentlemen with brains, respect for clients, all those things. How you express those and how you manifest them has to change with time.
Yes.
Or you'll find yourself in a bad place, you know, 20 years later, not having kept up with the actual movement of progress through the time. So I always like to talk about the fact that we were so lucky that we have as a core tenet focus on client. You know, focus on clients. That, you know, all the David Ogilvy-isms. You know, never forget who writes the check and all that. But because our culture is client-oriented, this not even allowed us, but forced us almost. Forces us to keep up with whatever is happening at the time. So before the internet, we had Ogilvy Interactive. The only reason we have Ogilvy Direct, and we're the largest direct marketing agency before anybody knew that direct marketing was a thing you were supposed to do, was because American Express needed somebody to write a letter to get people to sign up for American Express cards. So, you know, American Express said, do you guys have anyone who could write a letter? And we said, well, we have copywriters. I'm sure we could figure it out. And so, you know, the story is that this is a true story. The secretary to the senior vice president of marketing at American Express was the, quote, fulfillment house for the letters at the start. And when we did better and better on writing the letters and the applications came in volume, she just couldn't handle it. And they turned to Ogilvy and said, can you do this for us? And Ogilvy Direct was born, not because we thought direct marketing was the movement of the future, but because we were going to do whatever our clients needed us to do. And so the client-centric, client-focus part stays forever, I hope, and how that's expressed and manifest changes through the decades. and just, you know, I always said, we'll figure out what clients need. That's how we got to 360-degree brand stewardship. We'll figure out what clients need to build their brand, and then we'll either build it, buy it, joint venture with it, ally with it, acquire it. But we can never not do it. And I think it's that ability to kind of continue to see what's core to the culture and versus what you need to do behaviorally for the time.
What do we need to do in terms of continue to build a robust culture here? Because we're moving forward. What are your thoughts?
Well,
on
I
that?
think you have to believe, you have to teach. I think you have to ask people who don't get it or don't believe in it to leave. I don't think you can tolerate people who violate the culture. I serve on the board of GE, and you know, there are a lot of things Jack Welch did, but one of the things that moved me the most, kind of, is Jack used to divide the world, and when he was doing evaluations into 4 clusters. You know, so cluster 1, really easy. You know, meets the business goals, delivers everything that was promised, understands the culture, lives the culture. Easy. You know, that's the top group. Okay, the number 2 group doesn't quite make their numbers, doesn't quite make the goals for the year, but understands the culture, part of the culture, lives the culture, okay, for a while. Eventually you have to make your numbers. 3 is doesn't make the numbers, you know, doesn't live the culture. You know, those guys are gone. And, you know, Neutron Jack, you know, that was gone. Now, the 4th group was the most interesting. So the 4th group was makes the numbers in spades, doesn't understand, and live the culture. Jack said for years he kept out those people because you couldn't, you know, sort of deny the business success. 5 years before I joined the GE board, he said, no more. I'm firing 4. I can't. This company thrives because of its culture, because people believe in it, they buy into it, they live it. If you're not willing to do that, you're gone. And I do think that there is some wisdom to that. I think that what defines this company is its culture. What differentiates us is the culture. The reason I've stayed here for 40+ years is the culture. And I think if there are people who don't like it, there are people who don't like this culture, you know, don't like it, don't buy into it, don't believe in it, and don't behave in ways that are consistent with this culture, they should leave.
We'll talk a little about the clients. What makes us most successful for our clients?
Oh, I think, well, I think sort of sharing their goals, living their pain, understanding kind of what they're up against. One of the people used to ask me is, should I go and spend some time on the client side, agency people? And, you know, there's no right answer to that. But having been a client for a few years, I actually think, before I went to the agency side, I think was wonderfully helpful, actually. Because what I came to know is, you know, as a client, you have so many pressures on you. One of them is advertising and marketing and brand building. But you got the sales force calling you because the trade promotion's not rich enough. You know, you got the manufacturing guys calling because they can't produce the variant in enough quantity that you know, where you're putting a promotion behind it. You've got the legal guys calling you because something that you put on the label is not right, or, you know, so you have all these pressures. And then you have the agency, which is, and everybody's kind of shooting at you. Now, if the agency can't be your ally, they're the one ally you got over the course of the day. They're your friends. They're there to help you, support you, deliver what you need. And I learned that over 2 to 3 years. And so the empathy that I've always had for clients drove everything else. Because there are just certain days where they've had a bad day. And so, you know, they're not as friendly as you might hope them to be that day. But I get it. It's because the head of sales just reamed them out for the fact that Walmart didn't buy the promotion that, and they didn't have any more money. So I have enormous empathy for clients. Everything I do for them, I do to try to move their business ahead because that's how they're judged.
What do you see us stumbling with them?
Well, I think it's when we don't share the goals. I think it's when we don't present things to them in a business context, frankly. Mm-hmm. I think it's when we're rather narrow-minded because we believe that something is creatively brilliant and maybe they don't. I will say this to everyone. I have never, over the course of 40 years, had a brilliant, new, glorious idea that I brought to a client that they didn't buy. Not one time. Now, having said that, sometimes we present them 3 directions and one's a little better than 2 or 3, but the creative people really love 1. And, sometimes they might not buy 1. But when it's a big, new, extraordinary idea, I've never had a client reject it 1 time in my whole experience. But you do have to, you have to make clients brave. I think, for the account people who are here in the room, one of our functions is to make them brave and to say, this looks scary. I start every meeting now by saying, because it makes everyone feel better, all great advertising is polarizing. If there aren't 5 people in the room who hate it, it's probably not a great idea. It might be an okay idea, but it's probably not a great idea. Because, yeah. Great ideas make people uncomfortable because they break through and they do something to you. And when sometimes they do something to people that make them uncomfortable. So I actually got Lou Gerstner to a point where when we presented new work, he would ask how many letters. That was the code for how many people are going to write me and tell me they hate this, because he knew that they were going to, that if it was great, he was going to get letters. So that was before email. But anyway, it's the same. it's the same idea. So you just, but you do have to understand before you go into the room. Just think about what would make your client more comfortable? What are they looking for? What are they trying to do? And see if you could present anything you present in that context.
One of the things we talk about are the ebbs and the flows, the challenges of dealing with our clients. How do you stay motivated? How do you stay motivated when you're dealing with clients and challenges like that?
Well, first of all, we develop great ideas. I mean, the talent in this agency is remarkable. So you have to you get to the point where you believe that you have the answer, that you have an answer that's going to help them, that's really going to make a difference. And so that, to me, first of all, the quality of the work is so exciting. And then it's going to make a difference. And then to have the trust of your clients so that they actually do look to you and go, is that okay? Right. And then you have to be honest. I mean, you have to also tell them when you think you're not sure. Sometimes you go, I think this is great. I'm not sure. I think it'll work. But I think that honesty with clients, so you're not selling them stuff. Never sell them stuff. You got to share an idea, share a belief that you think this work will get them to where they want to be. Or the other thing is to give them an idea they didn't ask for. I mean, that's always the most fun thing of all. I love doing that, calling up a client and going, you have a minute? I got an idea. And it's like, it's the little sparkle in the day. It's kind of, you come in, they don't always buy it, because usually it's a little weird. But hey, so you go in and you bring them this little jewel, this treasure that they didn't ask for, and just you have to do it with humility. Of I had an idea, and or somebody on the team had an idea, and it might not work. And I remember going in with Bill Hamilton to Hardee's with a tray liner. which was really so weird. But here is an example. So Hardee's, they were a very difficult client. And they used to order up advertising every Monday. I always felt I was there with like a waitress, you know. It was like, okay, I need 2 French fry ads, you know, a commercial for the new Hardee's burger, you know, just whatever. And then on Thursday or Friday, you deliver the work. So Bill had the temerity on the phone because they asked for a French fries commercial. So he said, "Why do you want that?" I think he just was bored. I have no, just, and it was such a funny question, like, why do you want a French fries commercial if you're Hardee's? And they said, because our business goal for this week is to increase the check size, which is kind of an interesting intellectual challenge, right? Increase the check size. So Bill came back with a French fries commercial and a tray liner selling dessert. Because, you know, if you want to increase the check size, hey, let's not stop at French fries. Let's, you know, you're sitting, you're eating the hamburger, and here is a picture of the apple pie. And so it was great. It was like, this was a magic moment. It was a tray liner, you know. Just, we do tray liners. Just we can do that. So.
You touched a little bit about your career before. This day and this experience here is about people and giving them a sense of direction about what they want to do with their careers. You said often that your career was an accident. Talk to us a little about your career trajectory.
Well, it was an accident. I mean, you know, a lot of people know this story. I went to Columbia Business School because I didn't want to type, and my husband was in medical school. Someone had to earn a living, so it wasn't going to be him. So I guess that would be me. But I fell in love with marketing and advertising. And, you know, I was talking with the group last week about all the controversy with the CEO of Microsoft who kind of said, you never have to ask for a raise. You know, don't worry about that. We'll just take care of you, that guy. Well, it was good for, I always say it was the best thing that happened to Roger Goodell, because at least the women could get their animus from Roger Goodell to Satya. But I think it raises an interesting set of questions about how much responsibility you need to take for your own career. So having said that Ogilvy is this place that, as part of the culture, believes in people, develops them, challenges them, tries to give them education and opportunities to learn all along the way, you do have to take some responsibility for your own career development, I believe. And so, whereas I stayed at Ogilvy all the years, I asked for things. I mean, not in a confrontational way, but in a jolly sort of, hey, I'm really interested. I'd like to take this other thing on. But I think you have to raise your hand once in a while and say, I'm bored. I don't find this fulfilling anymore. I find these people too difficult to work with. I'd love to go and have another experience in another part of the agency. I'd love to go and have an experience abroad. I am amazed. One of the amazing things over the 40 years is how few people have done that. So Ogilvy is this sea of opportunity. I mean, we do everything everywhere. And so if you have a hankering, you know, to kind of see another discipline, work in another discipline, have another role in another office, you can't walk in and demand it. I mean, that's not going to happen. But if you can say to whoever you're working for, your leader, or, you know, if there were ever a chance for me to do what I'm doing right now, but to do it in another part of the world, or to try something in public relations, or vice versa, because I'm really interested in it. You know, I made history at Ogilvy, if you can believe this, because I raised my hand and said I wanted to go over to Ogilvy Direct. And people went, what? You know, people didn't do that. They didn't go across disciplines. But I was working, again, client-oriented. I was working on American Express, and I was really interested in the way advertising and direct marketing interacted. And And I also was ready to run something, and because I couldn't move really, because my husband is in private practice in New York, I thought this is a great opportunity. I'm really interested in Ogilvy Direct. There was more leadership opportunity over at Direct at the time. So I just raised my hand and said, you know, I would really like to do this if there were ever a chance to do something over there. And lo and behold, 3 weeks later, they made up a title. I was the general manager of Ogilvy, New York, because you know, that would give me I had a P&L, give me an opportunity to run something in the discipline that I thought would be interesting. But if I hadn't raised my hand, I never would have gone to Ogilvy Direct. Nobody was moving that way. So everybody here is on the let's develop people, you know, let's give them new opportunities. But you have to give us a clue. You know, you have to sometimes say, I'd be really interested in this, because it's not always obvious. And sometimes, you know, you kind of, somebody will say something to you and you think, would you actually really go do that? And you're surprised because the person goes, yeah, I would do that. I would do that. And so, you know, don't wait to be asked. Just kind of let us know. And as I said, it's not going to be next week. So, but at some point in time, if everybody knows that this is something you'd like to do, we will figure it out because it's part of our culture.
When did you know you wanted to become CEO?
I never knew I wanted to be CEO. Every time I was promoted, it was a surprise. It was like, what did you say? Just, I never set out to be CEO. Which is the truth. I found something I loved to do. I found an industry I loved. I found a company whose culture I loved. And I just kept doing more and more of it. That is the truth. I grew up with my clients because a lot of the people who are CEOs now, they were product managers. When I started, I grew up with them. And lo and behold, one day, I was asked to be CEO. And that really is the truth. Of course, the story some of you know is, you know, there's always this question of balance. And as I said, I was the first 9-month pregnant woman at Ogilvy. And so when Martin Sorrell called me to ask me to be CEO of Ogilvy, I was actually at field day for my littlest guy, and cell service in those days was horrific. I mean, you couldn't hear a thing. It was all static. And so I'm standing in Riverside Park, having no idea that this call was coming. I'm standing in Riverside Park, and they're running relay races around me, all the 7-year-olds. And I pick up the phone, and it's Martin. And Martin's very insistent. You know, it's hard to stop him once he starts. And I think he's asked me to be the CEO of Ogilvy, but I'm not sure, because there's all the noise from the boys, and and this is something you don't want to get wrong, right? You don't want to be that presumptuous. It's just if that's not what he's saying. So anyway, I said, Martin, can I call you back in about an hour? Just and so I called back, and in fact, he was asking me to be CEO, which, you know, was an enormous honor, and I was scared to death, of course. You know, every time I was promoted, I was scared to death. So that's one thing that, you know, I can share is everyone thinks the people they admire and they see above them is, you know, they're hard charging every day, they're, you know, sure of themselves, and, you know, everything's under control, whereas you are struggling. You know, I've come to know actually that everybody's scared. Everybody is almost equally scared. They present themselves in different ways. And so every time I got a new job, I was really scared. Including, I was really scared being CEO of Ogilvy, and but you know, you sort of you go, okay, I'm going to figure it out, and the first thing I did was go visit David Ogilvy and say, okay, I'm here, I'm in Tufu, I'm here for 3 days. Tell me everything I need to know. And we just had these incredible conversations over the course of the 3 days about, how he thought about the agency when he started, what he found, what he believed, and here again, the emphasis on people. David said to me, the only thing you have to think about is people. If you focus on the people, everything will work out. And he said, David said, I knew that when I was CEO. I spent a disproportionate time on the people in the agency. And if I were going to go back and do it all over again, I would spend more time. And that's what he said. And he said it many different ways, but he kind of said it over and over again over the course of 3 days. And you got it.
What were some of your best days, or even were some of your worst days in your role?
Oh, God. Well, anytime you lose a piece of business, that's no fun. So again, there is some karma. There's something. When we were fired on American Express, so some of you know that, some of you don't. It only lasted for 11 months, but we were fired. And the call came on a Friday afternoon. David Ogilvy was probably spending 3 weeks a year at this point in the agency. What were the odds of the call coming on a Friday afternoon? David Ogilvy is sitting in my office when the call comes. It was Ken Chenault, who's our dear friend, and Ken's calling. It was a mess at American Express. It wasn't, they had factions. They were fighting. They were deposing a CEO, and for whatever reason, they decided to wage the battle with 3 agencies. Each faction took an agency, and we were with the old school because we were the traditional American. We had been the American Express agency for so long. So the call comes on Friday afternoon, and it's devastating, right? It was our largest account at the time, and I was actually head of the New York office. I had been in the role for about 3 weeks, and so Saturday afternoon, I'm home. The phone rings. It's David Ogilvy. And he says, how are you? That's what he said. And I then do my most MBA, new managing director. Here's the impact on the revenue. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to think about it. Here's where we're going to move the great people so we don't lose the people. And he doesn't say a word. He lets me go on for like 10 minutes. I'm doing the PowerPoint presentation basically, on the phone. And at the end, there's just silence. And David said, I actually don't care about any of that. And then he said this, which I'll come back to. He said, they come, they go, they'll be back, someone else will come. He said, I called because I want to know how you are. And he said to me, if you are the slightest bit dispirited, demoralized, not wanting to come to work with as much energy and enthusiasm, we are a weaker agency on Monday. If you're fine and everything, your spirits are good and life continues on Monday, then we're fine. And I've never forgotten it. And when we lost Ford of Europe, which again came back in 10 months, but they were all on a cruise. So here's what happened. We were fired on Ford of Europe. I'm in the London office. I'm CEO at this point. I'm in the London office, and all the management is gone. They're on some cruise or something. And so I have to tell the whole agency that we've lost Ford of Europe, biggest client in London. And so I stood on it. I remember this. I stood on a desk in the middle because they had an open plan, and I told them the David Ogilvy story, and everyone was okay. I mean, okay. Now I'll tell you, it's true. It's absolutely true. And what happened was, 1 week later, I got a call from Citi saying, would you take all our card business? So I could have replaced the business in a minute. I decided not to because American Express then said, hey, can you hold on to all the service establishment stuff because these guys, it went to Shy a Day for 11 months. These guys don't know how to do all that service establishment stuff. And so I said, yes, of course. And we won it back because we used the service establishment business to be the ground on which we rebuilt the relationship and did new work. And so David was right about that. They come, they go. 11 months later, they were back. but he's right. So that as long as the people in the organization are still believers, are still enthusiastic about the work that they do, we are fine.
Shelly, over the last few months, we've made a concerted effort to focus on the gender challenges that we've had in the organization, and it's obviously something that's affecting the industry and the world.
The world. Right.
You know, how do you see us? Are we making progress with women in the workplace?
Well, you're asking someone who started in a place where I was the only woman in the room. So, my perspective is somewhat different. So, I think we've made huge. I'll get to Ogilvy in a second, but let's just talk about the world. It's sort of the fact that there are so many women sitting in any room is remarkable. If you had asked me when I graduated from Columbia Business School, there were 4 women in a class of 275. If you had said to me, could you ever imagine a time where the CEO of IBM, General Motors, DuPont, Hewlett-Packard, and others would be women, I'd say you are crazy. So the fact that we have these women in positions that you never would have imagined them to be in before, I think is remarkable progress. So that's kind of the qualitative sense. There are more women on boards for sure than there ever were before, but is there still unconscious bias? I think absolutely. And I watch it on boards I sit on. I watch it with clients. One of the best confessions I ever heard was a few months ago. I was on a panel with the man who's the chairman of Deloitte. He's a Brit. And he said to the assembled masses, he said, I know I am guilty of unconscious stereotyping and discrimination. And he said, therefore, because I know it, he said, when somebody says we need to fill the position of, leader of Deloitte in Germany, and I immediately picture 3 possible candidates, all of whom look exactly like me, a 55-year-old white man, he said, I force myself to stop and say, okay, what is the most interesting slate of candidates that I can put forward for this opportunity? And I think it actually is all about opportunities. It's not about titles. I think people make a mistake when they focus on titles. It's about the assignment you have, because that's how the world sees you, watches you, judges you, and decides whether or not you can take on the next one of those. So that when you have the assignment of building something that makes all the difference to the future of the company, I don't care what your title is or your level is, you will get the next job. And you're successful, you'll get the next job. That's how it happens. Ginny Rometty, it wasn't what her title was, it was the fact that she built services, which was the future of IBM. So you have to focus on the content of the assignment. And the big ones are scary. So when I usually hate these articles about women. I'm not a big fan of lean in. I don't like any of that. But in The Atlantic, a few months ago, there was an article on self-confidence. I think those women actually even came to speak here. I thought there was so much wisdom in that article about having the courage to take on something scary. Everything important is scary. Just accept it. Everything, if you're not scared, it's probably not important enough. It's probably not big enough. Now, women, when it's scary, think of the 5 reasons why they can't do that. I don't have the right experience. I've never lived outside the country. I don't know enough about finance. Name your excuse. But it's just because you're scared. Because you should be, because it's big. And at the end of the day, you just got to jump. It's just kind of, if you try to do the pluses, the minuses, you're never going to get to yes, which is what you need to get to. You can just figure out how to get yourself to say yes. So if that's pluses and minuses, good enough. If that's just, I'm never going to figure it out, I'm just going to take the leap, go with that. But figure out a way to get to yes when it's big and it's scary. And I think that's where women are not seizing the opportunities that they need to move ahead. And I think they're waiting for someone to put a title on their heads. And that only, first you do the job, then you get the title. And again, I think that it's this constant interaction between an organization giving opportunities, women either seizing them when they're given or raising their hands and saying, you might never have thought about me as a salesperson, but I'd like to try that. I'd like to take that on. It's out of my comfort zone, but I'd like to give it a shot.
What about at Ogilvy? What are your thoughts in terms of where we are now?
Well, I think we have, lots of really talented women, and I think we just have to make sure that we are giving women the big opportunities. It's not for lack of talent. I mean, for sure. And so I think we need some activation of assignments and opportunities, and bring people, allow people to show what they can do.
You know, when people think of your life and your career, they use many different words: iconic, trailblazer, brand steward, mother, partner, renegade, inspirational. If you could choose one word to describe your life and career so far, what would it be? I got her.
I got completely fulfilling. I didn't know starting out that you could fit all this stuff into one life. So here's another secret that I discovered. You can fit into your life everything you love to do. You can fit in your life everything you love. What you can't fit in is the stuff that you find boring, frustrating, unfulfilling. And so you just gotta get that stuff away. Just forget about that stuff. And just grab everything you love to do, because you'll find that you'll make it work. And that's something that I didn't know. But even as I was saying to you, I mean, I don't need to help the Department of Defense at this point in my life. It's just like, I don't even know why I said yes, but it was just like one thing. These soldiers are so incredible. The military is so amazing, the people who are in it. They deserve better organizational, sort of oversight. And so you do it because you want to help. You do it because you think you can make a difference, and you make it work. You fit it in. But once again, you say yes. Now, having said that, it's sort of, I always like to quote, there was a creative director here, Lori Pollack, who she said a number of amazing things, but one of my favorites is, dust has no emotional content. So, you go, my house isn't going to be clean, my kids are going to have holes in their shoes. It's just sort of like, forget all that stuff. Just like, I didn't know that at the start. My mother was appalled at the way my children looked. Their clothes were torn, they needed haircuts, they're just, but you got to a point where you said, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. Dust doesn't matter. Blazer buttons don't matter. Sometimes I was a little late getting the turnip for the vegetable soup for nursery school. It's just that kind of stuff. It doesn't you got to figure out what matters. And then you have this tremendously varied life that's filled with all these different things you love to do. I mean, you know, I'm as I said, I have a low boredom threshold. I'm pretty eclectic. I like to have lots of different things. You know, there are people who just want to focus on one thing. That's great too, but you need to know what it is that turns you on, you know, what it is you love. And you've got to love your job. You're never going to find balance in your life if you don't love what you do, you know, 10, 12 hours a day at minimum. So, you know, that's really important. People who don't like their jobs are really unhappy people. It's, again, I just am so moved by this Defense Department experience yesterday. There were these Navy pilots I was talking to yesterday. They tell these stories, their eyes light up. Now, of course, they're in the Pentagon fixing websites now. I have no idea. I think in between, you know, what do they call it? Whatever they call them when they go for 6 months, they come back to the Pentagon and do things like that. But when they talk about being in the plane and actually fighting in Afghanistan, you know, their eyes light up. It's just they love what they do. They don't. You want to say, isn't it dangerous? No, they like that. It's, no, seriously. I mean, it's making sure that you found something in your professional life that you love to do, that you want to tell people about, that you want to share at the end of the day, that even if it's crazy or funny or, you know, whatever it is, but it's kind of exploding out of you to share with other people because it moved you in some way, even, you know, even if it's anger or something, but it moved you. It made a difference to you over the course of the day. It's just, I think it's just crucial to finding happiness in life.
Thank you for those insights. We have time for 2 questions. Does anyone have any questions? The question was, do you think David Ogilvy was scared?
I think he had to be. You know, he put up a shingle. He was a single person sitting in an office and started a business. I think he had to be scared. You never saw signs of it, ever. But it's an interesting question. There was one moment I thought of a little touch of vulnerability. David invited me and my family to visit him in Tufu. And I was a fairly junior person. I mean, maybe I was like, head of Ogilvy Direct in New York or something like that. So anyway, we went out to we went to Tufu. It was like that. Just we went to Tufu, all of us. Two of my 3 children went with me, and so, you know, we're all in our best behavior. We're wondering what David and her to think. You know, just kind of hoping the kids behave. Just and so it was great, and we had a great time and all that. A number of years later, I think David might have died by that point. Someone showed me a note that he had written to someone in New York about our visit and said, I think she had a good time. I hope she had a good time. We tried really hard to do stuff for the kids. We enjoyed it. I hope they did. You know, it was just that little moment of he was as anxious as I was about the success of the visit. And that was maybe the only time I ever saw sort of, but that made me think that for every moment that you think, you know, it's all the bravado, all the larger than life, that he too had moments where he's trying and hoping it's working. So it was a moment of vulnerability that I appreciated.
Ladies and gentlemen, our time is up. I do apologize that we didn't get another chance.
To you.
Hands for Shelly.